This is what I learned from smoking my very first brisket. I smoked this brisket the day after I put together this pellet smoker gifted from Traeger. I was eager to get started on learning how to use it. So first and foremost, trimming takes a freaking long time. I got this 18-pound prime cut from Sam's Club, and I asked my friend Tyler a bunch of questions ahead of time on how I should trim it, and even though I was confident in going into the trim, I kept second guessing myself. I learned that I need to invest in a sharp boning knife. I was using my sharpest knife and it just wasn't giving me the flexibility for some of the cuts. I found myself cutting towards myself a ton, which is a big no-no, but it just felt easier at the time. I also learned that it helps to trim it straight from the fridge when it's firm. I noticed as time passed, the fat was getting warmer, which made it harder to slice through. Tyler told me that it was important to trim the brisket so that it was aerodynamic. When it's smooth, there's a nice even flow of air and smoke over the brisket, which allows for it to cook more evenly. You also don't want pieces of fat hanging because it can burn or curl up.
Holy moly, this is taking forever.
So about an hour and a half later, this is what I ended up with. A bit of a hack job, but not too bad. For the seasoning, I went with coarse kosher salt and coarse black pepper. I just went 50-50 by weight, started seasoning the meat, and then realized, oh, I forgot the binder. No. I have found out that using a binder is a big debate in the barbecue world, so if you use it or don't use it, let me know why in the comments. I'm just using some mustard and spreading it out before the seasoning. I thought I was being pretty liberal with the seasoning, but looking back, I could have been way more heavy-handed. I let that dry brine in the fridge overnight. The next morning, I set my Traeger to 225 degrees Fahrenheit, placed the brisket in once it got to temp, and I also put in the supplied temp probe. The bark was developing on the outside, but I wanted it to be darker. You can definitely see the spots where I could have added more seasoning. We are 5 hours in. The good news is that the temp probe was the same temp as my thermopin. I learned that I couldn't help myself from checking it every once in a while. I know you got to keep it close to keep the heat in, but I just wanted to take a look. Many times. Also, I learned that you cannot get anything done until the meat is done cooking. I was thinking that I would work while it was in the smoker, but I kept freaking myself out that I messed it up or it was at the wrong temp. I just spent the entire time on my phone looking at pictures of other people's brisket to compare. Hopefully this anxiety will go down as I smoke more often. And this is how it looked 9 hours in. Temperature was at 189, 30 minutes later it was at 197, and then at about the 10-hour mark it hit 203, and that's when I pulled it. Another thing I learned is that I need some heat-proof gloves. I was using my winter gloves with food safe gloves over the top. It was kind of funny because I was pulling out the brisket at the same time a bunch of fire trucks showed up. Turns out it was a false alarm. This is how much fat was in the drip tray if you were curious. So I brought the brisket inside and let it sit on the counter for about 30 minutes so the temperature could come down a little bit. I set my oven to the lowest it could go, which was 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I wrapped my brisket in foil. Side note, the oven automatically turns off after 12 hours. Luckily, I noticed when it happened. So I took it out about 15 hours after putting it in the oven, and the meat was looking jiggly, which made me happy, and I looked for the fat line that separated the point from the flat. I had a little trouble in the beginning, but then figured it out. I also learned that I shouldn't move it around as much because I was scraping the seasoning off each time I did that. So I got the point and the flat separated. I scraped off a little bit of the extra fat and then chopped the point into cubes so that I could make burnt ends. It was just like cutting through butter, and I was able to tell where I did a better job at trimming the fat than other spots by how thick the fat was beneath the bark. Taste-wise, it could have used more seasoning. It's just such a huge fatty piece that I don't think I can over-season it. A serrated knife was okay for slicing the flat side, but I'm tempted to buy a long slicing knife. Hopefully this doesn't turn into an expensive hobby. So I definitely left like too much fat here, but I made some burnt ends with the point, and with the flat I cut for some sandwiches. I'm really happy with how this turned out, but I'd like to try cooking it all the way through at 225 next time. I'd like a better bark, and I'd like the flat to be less dry. Also add more seasoning, and hopefully next time the trimming will take less time. Let me know if you have any suggestions or if you want to share things you've learned while smoking brisket. Also, big thank you to Traeger for making this all possible with this gifted smoker.